Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. We're going to do another photo stamping scene using nature set number 21. I haven't used this one yet, but I've used all the components, but I don't think I've used it as a set quite yet. And I was looking at this photograph right here, and I thought, I think the photograph, well, okay, I guess it goes that way. I thought it went this way, but I was thinking these shadows down here, inherent in the photograph itself, could represent a nice kind of shadow area for like maybe a canopy of trees or something of that sort. With photo stamping, if you're going with an inherent fixed or established photograph of some skies or something like that, then you have to kind of, work around, your composition a little bit like that when there is darks and lights throughout the piece. And these cloudy types of things, formations in here, I thought would make a kind of a nice misty foundation for which to build additional mist. You've seen that in kind of swampy areas, this water type of environment with a lot of mist all over the place. So I thought that that area up there would provide kind of a nice established, kind of atmosphere for this type of scenery. Okay, so I don't know. Let's see. Let's take a look here and figure out what we'll do here. I can go with the central kind of bayou house in here and create some trees around it. You can also just do it with just picking and choosing which elements you'd like to use in here. Um, let's go ahead and use the house. That's kind of the main focal point of the scene, but by no means does it have to be used anytime you use this set. But I don't know, being that I'm using this set here as a set for the first time, why don't we go ahead and go with that. Okay, so just standard dye-based ink is what you want to use on here. You don't want to use kind of an ink like a standard pigment ink because it will not dry on a photographic print paper. Okay, you can see this right here. Where I just got my prints made. This is just like had this made at Costco. I don't know if they have their photographic departments anymore, but I think you can still order online. But you can just print this photograph out on some photo paper that you have at home on an inkjet printer or something like that, and then use your dye-based inks right on here. Dye-based inks will they'll dry by kind of absorption, evaporation into this type of paper, but the oil-based pigment inks, besides brilliance, okay, they're not going to dry on here because this is an emulsion coating on here, so you can use a StazOn or something like that. StazOn dries on everything, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be coloring this scene using some alcohol markers, so alcohol and kind of a water-based dye. Shouldn't mix and blur, but if you use something like a StazOn, which is a solvent ink, going into it with alcohol, it could dissolve it. So, just your standard water-based ink. That makes it easy for us because, everyone has kind of a water-based, pen, right? Or pad, I should say. All right, let's see here. We can go with some other cypresses in the foreground. This one right here is kind of a larger one. So I wouldn't put that in the background. You wouldn't put it higher up because that represents kind of larger trees. Unless you want to just say these trees around the house are kind of smaller ones, which you could do, but that would go all the way up to the top of the scene, and I don't think I want that. Let's see here. Why don't we use kind of a large cypress here. It's not my largest ones, okay, but we'll put this right here in the foreground. All right, maybe a couple on each side flanking it. You'll notice that these trees like here, they can almost act kind of visually like columns or something like that. But also what you do is when you're using kind of large format trees like this in your foreground, it frames off the piece and gives it kind of a nice foundation. There's stability in your composition when you have things on both sides. Now you don't have to do that every time. You could do other types of looks for kind of different type of kind of a artistic statement, but just in general, if you're going for just standard kind of compositional, kind of foundational structuring, where you're going for balance and stability from a visual sense, it works really well. Okay, so that being said, anytime you have trees kind of ending like that, I've designed them to go off the top of your page. If you stamp it too low down here, these are going to end, unless you put like a bunch of branches or leaves up there. Okay, so I just have to make sure that that goes off the top of the page. All right, and we'll just go off the side. I'll have it going off the page a little bit up top, and I'll have it kind of going off the page, off the left-hand side. Just a little bit of some of the shadows that went out there. But see, that's kind of out of balance, right? So that's when you put another one on that side. And you can see how beautiful just your standard dye-based ink stamp onto this, photographic paper. It's not the same thing as glossy cardstock, though, okay? Now, can you print, your inkjet printer on glossy cardstock? I'm not really quite sure, but you can do some testing. A lot of people have a lot of paper, paper just in storage that they just use. I don't know. I think we were just as a society doing like a ton of printing at home when digital cameras were kind of introduced, and suddenly you didn't have to have your prints made professionally. You can do them at home, and I think everyone was like printing. You can buy printers for really cheap, and you'd be buying printers, and you might get a pack of paper. Epson printer would come with Epson paper or something like that, or Kodak would come with with a pack of that. Free packs. Buy a printer, get a pack of paper. A $20 pack of paper for just a few dollars or something like that. And now everyone has all this kind of photo paper that they haven't been using because we kind of stopped using paper so much. All right, this is the small cluster of cypresses. I'm going to put it higher. Not higher than the top of the trees, but you have to kind of, when you're thinking about placement of images in the background, this is kind of the horizon line down here, all right, on this cabin. So what you want to do is you want to place this horizon right here, okay, right down there, higher than the horizon here, so that looks like it's farther off in the distance. You can kind of do it side by side too, but just in general, these images using kind of smaller versions of things are often seen as background, right? So what I've done here too is I just kind of wiped off some of that ink off the bottom and see how it looks like it's kind of inherently in some mist. I mean, I could have done it for my foreground right here too. Maybe I should have, but I don't know. Sometimes I forget to do that. In which case, you can just do that with your white ink, but it's just as easy to take this and go like this. Okay, now this one I'm taking off kind of a little bit more. Maybe I'll blot off my trees a little bit so they stamp out lighter, and in turn they look like they're farther off in the distance. Okay. Now, people say that I make this stuff look easy because normally if you're going to stamp something behind something like this, what you want to do is you really want to mask it off very carefully, and you want to place it down and whatnot. I just don't bother doing that. I just kind of wipe this off like that, and I dab some of it off. So if it's going to stamp lighter than this foreground, then you don't really need to mask anything off, right? Because it's just lighter to begin with. So it's not. I mean, if I look close, this probably goes into this tree, but it doesn't matter. So, I make things look easy because I don't do all this stuff that is required of a lot of types of images out there in the industry where you have to do some careful masking. I just draw it in my designs where you don't have to do that. So if you make it inherent in the designs, then you don't have to do these kind of more careful types of processes. So I just take care of that right up front in the designs themselves. Okay. All right, so see how that's kind of lighter like that? It's because I blotted it off first, right? Now if I want some back here. Now what I don't want to do is I don't want to ink this up and go for a full impression right over the top of my cabin because you'll be able to see it. But if you take that ink off and it's lighter, no big deal, right? Now I don't want to get some impressions in my windows either because those are open. Do you see the difference there? You know, stamping over kind of a solid image, you know, right back in here, and stamping over open areas. Okay, so I create a lot of closed areas so that when we're doing background on them, you don't have to worry about it. You know, it just makes it so much easier. And when you're doing it, you just kind of have to get used to it. You know, we're doing a lot of kind of different techniques for certain types of usages with certain types of images. But these images like this, hopefully you don't have to worry about it. And hopefully I've, you know, designed these correctly, where I don't have to do it either. You know, I don't want to have to do like careful tedium types of things. Okay, so see this? I'm just kind of, this is going for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 impressions, but I've done them at different values. Here's a real dark value. Here's a little bit of a lighter value. Well, it's about the same as that one, right? This one's certainly lighter, the lightest, and that one's a little bit lighter, so that's how you get that depth in there. And I mean, we didn't do any masking. I mean, sometimes you want to throw a little mask on it like that, you know, if you want to, you know, something right behind there, but otherwise, you know, you don't have to do it. All right. A little lesson on, I don't know, the masking or the, you know, the necessity or, you know, not needing something like that. Okay, so Spanish moss, kind of an overhanging tree limb. You can place it, you know, something like this. You can have it coming in from the side here as another layer, okay? And I have it kind of hanging in from both left and right. I tend to see kind of this bayou and kind of swampy areas, very congested as far as life goes, and you know, just kind of the overall feel of it. You know, a very dense area, closed in. So see how that kind of really frames things off from the top very nicely. You have the Spanish moss hanging down like so. And let's do the opposite side. I don't want to go for 2 of those. Well, I don't know, I guess you can. But if you have the set, why not use the other side so you have 2 coming in this way. Alright, you can make it lower, higher, whatever. I'll make it a little bit higher just so it's not so kind of, you know, symmetrical from the other side. See that? You just kind of do it like so. Or I could put, how about this? To make it so it's not quite so symmetrical, we'll do 2 impressions will come down like this. Alright? So see how this is really kind of building and filling in as far as like a, I don't know, kind of a densely packed kind of living environment. Okay, so those things in the water, if you've, I don't know, seen like swampy areas, these are called knees, as in, you know, kind of a joint on your leg, K-N-E, knees, okay? And these are, I don't know what these are. I don't know what they function as far as a biological thing, if it's like an extra kind of oxygen type of thing. You know, you see them at the base of these cypresses like this. But here's this kind of isolated one, like so. Let's put one kind of over here. This kind of gives us a little bit of foreground. You know, I'm not going to put like reeds down here, usually growing out of the water, unless it's kind of like a, unless it's like a flooded type of area with you know, kind of a seasonal flooding type of thing. But see how that kind of builds in like this, and I have this lower down here. so it doesn't look like, oh my god, those are as high as the cabin. No, that's in the distance because it's higher up on my composition. Okay, now one of the things I should mention is that as I stamp this out, okay, emulsion coated photo paper, it's a little bit more kind of sealed off than, say, like a cardstock. So when I first stamp this out, when this ink is still wet, it's still kind of drying on here, but when it dries lighter than what it looks like when you first stamp it out, okay? So just keep that in mind. It's not something that's, going wrong with your piece. All right, now I'm thinking about stamping this bird in here in the foreground, but I might want to do some coloring in and do all my little effects in here first before I use something like this. But if I use alcohol inks on here, I can't really stamp this over it in dye-based ink because that's water. You can't stamp water over alcohol, but you can put alcohol over water. It's just like you can put oil-based paints over water-based paints, but you can't put like water-based paints over oil-based ones because they'll kind of come up, okay? Like I'm talking about like home, your home, painting your walls or something like that. And the same type of concept applies to media with your artwork, okay? All right, so I tell you what, I have this little water lily grass type of thing too. Let's get a little of that in there. Okay. All right. So that kind of filled in that area down here. I don't know how much of that we'll see because I'm going to add some shading and everything in here when I get to that. Okay, that is fun. I really enjoy using these stamps like this. And I used quite a bit of impressions in here, but when we're talking about this type of environment like this again, you kind of envision it with a lot of, I don't know, kind of a material, biological material in there. These types of areas are really alive. Okay, now one of the things when I mentioned, now I just re-inked this too, so everything was kind of wet. But this does take a while to dry, so let's just expedite it with some heat gun heat setting. Okay, let's take a look here and see. Yeah, a little bit more. Might be like a little drop or two on here that's still a little bit moist, and I might get a little bit of smearing if I go over it with some alcohol right now, but it's not because it's putting the dye-based ink back into solution. It's just simply because it's wet. Okay, so I like building up my tones even if I start drawing on here and I can't see anything kind of being applied. That's still alright with me. I like starting very light. And then if I can't see something, that color that I'm applying, then I can always go darker. But that's kind of always better than kind of jumping into it too fast. All right, so I'm grabbing some different brown tones here, and I was figuring some blue tones for my water and maybe some green, kind of making it look a little bit, I don't know, kind of like water that's kind of still, you know, and not moving too much. So anyways, these are just some different, you know, a couple different brands of alcohol pens. All right. And I'm just kind of picking out some colors, you know, there might be some redundancy between one brand and the next, but I always like to kind of try something out, and if it's not getting me what I want, then I try color and, you know, another brand or something. All right, so here's some gray, some greens, and some blues. But that might make for a decent combination there. But just, I would grab everything out and kind of make your process somewhat visual. All right, so you can kind of see if these colors look like they kind of harmonize to your eye, okay? I think that's just the easiest way to work. I mean, there's other ways to work, and, you know, there are other ways that probably work better than what I'm doing now. But I'm going to give things a try and see what process that you like, especially if you haven't done something like this. A lot of people haven't colored on photo paper, and neither have I. I mean, it's just been in the videos that I've done, you know. So there's a lot of kind of processes that I'm still kind of, you know, testing out or, you know, kind of developing myself. So that blue right there was a little bit too. Look at this blue right here. It's almost like, it's practically like a blender pen. It's barely kind of blue there. But, see, that's a good one to start off with. Because it is so light. Okay? Now, I can't really see too much here because this, the surface down here, the photograph, is already kind of darker than this transparent color. And remember, alcohol inks are transparent, so the darker element that you're layering it on top will always show through. Okay, so we need to go darker than that. All right, that didn't show up at all anywhere. Okay, now here's blue-gray. I don't think that's going to show up either. But again, you know, it's not, well, I can get a little bit of it showing. Okay, now what I'm doing right here is I'm kind of working around those windows down there, the reflection of the windows, okay? Okay, I can see a little bit of blue happening. It's very subtle. Okay, so just, I would suggest using those lighter tones, you know, to begin with. Now here's one of the things too. Let's say I'm smearing and dragging some of that ink that I've already laid down a little bit. As long as it's not like this big smear that's dragging across like that, it can work out because you're utilizing some of the ink from this and some of the ink that's already been laid down, and it's giving you something, a color in between. So that's not bad because it might blend into the piece a little bit better that way. You know, having some of that ink from your impressions, okay? So it's not necessarily a bad thing, okay? In fact, it could be a good thing. It could be a strength, okay, of the combination or process. All right, so let's see, going up into some of these branches. I know this is blue, but what I like to do is I like to kind of incorporate some of the colors that I'm using in a certain area with the rest of the piece. So can you see this right here? It is picking up some of that black, so when I did that little drag, it was darker like that. So, that being said, if you want to clean off your pen, just do a little scribble with that and get that ink that's on there off. Alright, so there's some blue. It's on my trees. The trees will be, for the most part, a little bit more of a brownish tinge, okay? But you have some of this color in there, so hopefully those two colors will kind of harmonize with each other. Alright, let's see this one. It's a little bit too warm, huh? But you can blend it in. Here's a brownish gray. This is one of my favorite colors right here. See that right there? It's kind of, it's not so super warm. It's a little bit more of a kind of a neutral. And I use some of it down in my kind of shadows as well. It's good for structures See this where I use it around my windows? Kind of makes the windows seem a little bit lighter by contrast. Okay. Put down your water around those windows down here. Fill in the water. Now remember what you color with this too. Okay. We'll use like a blending pen or just a lighter color to blend this in a little bit more, so it doesn't have to be perfectly blended in at all. See how kind of subtle that is? And it's, you know, a small change. That would stand out a little bit more. Not that I don't want to use that, but I don't want to use it yet. I kind of want to kind of ease into kind of the brighter and darker types of colors. Let's use it right now. Let's use a little bit of this on my trees in here. See how that kind of really warms that up like that? I don't know if I want it too warm. I don't want the scene too warm. But see that right there? Okay. Actually, it does look pretty good, I think. So I'm going to put a little bit on top of this rooftop right here. Okay. And I'm applying it in some of this area where I've already applied the brownish gray, which is kind of a cooler, you know, gray for it being a brown. All right, so see that on cabin? I kind of warmed it up a little bit, but it's not, you know, the color that I want in the end result. Okay, let's get a little more bold with some, maybe that's a little bit too, that's a real bright blue, isn't it? How about this one? This one's a little bit more of a mellow blue. Okay, but it's a little bit, you know, more, you can bring more hue, or, you know, make it a little bit more colorful this way. It's not super colorful by any means, but, you know, that's just, you know, a lot more color and brightness than like that brownish gray. So I'm just talking about by kind of contrast is here. Now, remember too, when you're doing photo stamping, you already have a lot of color in here, so it's not like you have to color everything up completely. It's just kind of going in and enhancing something, you know, a streak here like that, or two, or, you know, putting something down in the shadows. See what kind of, that's the benefits of using kind of, you know, kind of lighter tones. You can build up and add to it accordingly. Here's a bit of a green. It's kind of a dull green or a really light green, right? But it's a little bit warmer. And let's get some of it down here. I'm mixing in with some of the colors that I've already added. Go around into this grassy area around my cabin. Nothing I've done here is too extreme, but you can see these color changes kind of happening in there, right? You know, see these cypress trees like that. Let's kind of develop them a little bit more. Let's go with, let me take a look at this one right here. That one's really dark brown, isn't it? Let me get a little bit down here like this, okay? I'm just kind of like applying it a little bit. It's almost like I'm using this surface as my palette, okay? I add that down like that, and then let's go back with, I don't know, something like a brownish gray. If you have like a gray or something like that, you don't have this color. See this right here? Then I just kind of blend it in like this. Okay, so I get some of that kind of warm, darker brown tone kind of worked in there. I can remove some too just by kind of going like this and kind of building it up a little bit. Okay, so that going back to this lighter color like this, you can use it like an eraser too by removing tone. I don't want to do that. I just want to kind of mix it around and have a little bit of it showing. Gives the tree some kind of nice texture in the bark. You know, bark isn't just like one color usually. It, you know, there's like different tones to it. Is it kind of ages and peels in some areas. You put some of it down in your reflection as well, you know, have some of that, you know, translated down here. Okay, you put some moss onto your trees. That's a little bit bright, isn't it? Or dark. Let's see if I have something else here. Let's try this one. Yeah, that one's a little bit too yellow. Let's go with this one again then. Maybe it'll be a combination of the two. I don't know. So coming into here, so see this is green because it's on white paper, but when you put it over these other tones, you know, it's going to look different, all right? Maybe this kind of represents kind of this, you know, mossy type of color here. You know, swamp, see that right there? See all those different color tones that are happening just within this tree? Let's bring some of it down here into the base. Put a little bit of it into the water as well. So you can kind of scumble it like this. But I'm doing it kind of over a darker area so it doesn't show quite as extreme as the mark itself that I'm doing. See this right here? I just kind of make things a little bit darker and darker. Now, don't these look like they're closer to us because they're darker than the background? Oh, I forgot about this one. See that right there? Okay. Let's try to give a little bit more mass to the cabin. Let me go back in here with some additional brownish gray. Let's go underneath the you know, the little patio area, the planks. I'll put a little bit of a shadow onto them, but I'll leave them a little bit light too, like they're capturing some of the light from the windows on there. Oh, see these little two pillars. Here's one of the good things about, you know, coloring with pens, is you can get very detailed in here. So I can give those posts a little bit of tone. Okay, and let's color some of this mossy branches right here. A little bit of tone. Should make them stand out from the background a little bit more. All right. I mean, it's subtle up there, but they stand out a little bit more. And why don't we go into that moss with them? Instead of thinking about it in terms of like one color, we'll think about it in terms of like multiples, okay? So here's a bit of this kind of jungle green. It's kind of like an olive green. We'll go into here and just kind of color that kind of draping, you know, hanging moss. A little bit of this. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of going like this, like that, right? So you don't have to color in the whole thing, okay? Have it kind of varied. I think that makes it a little bit more realistic in terms of lighting on it. But all this stuff like this, all these little techniques, not having things have to be so perfectly kind of positioned and masked and all that, or colored like this. It just means that, you know, you don't have to be so kind of precise on anything. And if anything, it might kind of enhance the piece in general. Now look at that green in there. It looks pretty good against that background, like that. But let's add a little bit of variety to it. Let's come into it with kind of this little bit of a lighter green, okay? See, I don't think I've used this one yet. It's got a little bit of that kind of alcohol stuff on it here. There, that opened it up. Just see, I'm just kind of adding a little touch like that. Okay? And I don't know, you can do it on all of it or some of it, pieces. It just kind of warms it up a little bit. I'll add it a little bit on the trunk here, maybe a little bit of that lighter green. I think that looks pretty cool. You even add a touch of it onto your house, maybe. You know, it's like algae or something, you know, on the tree. Let's warm up that house a touch, okay? It is kind of the focal point of the scene, but so I didn't want to use this initially because I thought it was too warm, too bright. But now that I've layered everything in here, I think I can kind of create a, you know, kind of a harmony between this color and, you know, the surrounding area. It kind of creates a little bit of a kind of a relationship between the two. All right, so see that? You know, I mean, you don't see that like this color showing up in here, but because I've layered it over my other tones, but it did warm it up a touch. And I'm putting it on the planks there too, something like that. All right, now I don't have to go too much more. I don't know. You certainly could if you want to kind of, you know, kind of amp things up a touch. Let me try this one. A little bit of blue down here, here and there, I should say. It's a little bit extreme, I know, but I'm doing that for the purpose of going back into it with this one, okay? It's a little bit of a gray, okay? And the gray should kind of knock it down a little bit, but it'll kind of move it around a little bit. I like the ability of kind of adding in kind of that almost watercolory type of texturing with alcohol pens, because when you lay down a certain color of alcohol ink over another color, you're putting the previous layer back into solution, and it kind of spreads around, okay? Now I've got a little bit too light in there, so what I'm going to do is, let's go back to that lightest of blue, or even a blender pen, okay? So this is just my blender alcohol pen. Let's come in this and just kind of add some lighter tinges in here. This is like, no, this one's definitely like using an eraser. Oh, we have our little lilies down here. I don't need to do this, but let's see if I have like a really subtle green. That's my lightest green that I pulled out with my pens, and I'll just kind of add a little bit of that green. It doesn't look greeny, you know, but there might be a little bit of touch of warmth to it. Okay. Actually, it looks pretty good here in my water. So let's add a little bit of that. Let's go a little bit more green up in these this grassy area too. Okay. All right, but that's too much. But you just blend it out. Or you kind of spread it around too, okay? I'm not removing this one, I'm just kind of diluting it a little bit. Alright, so I think that looks pretty interesting as far as my piece. It looks fairly dimensional on camera in terms of kind of the visual depth of the piece. Alright, so this photo stamping it's just really fun, especially when you're dealing with clouds, because you have that established kind of mist in there. So when you add additional texturing of that same sort with your white pigment inks, it brings everything together, because you have that misty background with the clouds, and when you bring it into the foreground, you're really taking that same type of texturing, value white, or, you know, lighter tones in there, and you're bringing background into the foreground, both in terms of value and texture, bringing continuity throughout the entire piece. So you're bringing, all that type of element throughout all these other areas. And I really encourage you to play around with this. Okay, but here's your troubleshooting area right up front, okay? Anyone that's ever done this, like our pads are, this type of pad, white pigment ink, it's usually what we emboss with. So when you emboss with something, you stamp something in there and you get an impression of it. You don't want that impression to be really super dry and light because the embossing pattern is not going to stick to it. So our pads, we're not using it very often. So your white pads are usually really super juicy. Mine's not because I use it all the time for this type of effect. 100% cotton ball, okay? And what you want to do, let me just take this piece of foil right here because you can see what I'm doing right here, okay? See that? See how lightly that is kind of applied? Now that's just straight out of my pad, okay? It's not a big globby mess. Okay, now think about foils and pigment inks. You can just kind of rub it right off, okay? So that's what you want. You want a very light touch, but if your pad is really juicy, just tap a little bit of it. Get pretty good coverage, in terms of the surrounding area, but then blot a lot of it off so that when you take it on here, you're just barely applying anything. I say that all the time, but and I have to say that to myself too, because when I re-ink this or something like that, and I go like that, it's like I might start tapping around. It's like, oh my gosh, it's too much. So I definitely know where you're coming from when you're doing that. But think about it like this. You're applying mist. You're not applying a direct 100% blob of white ink. That's not what you're going for. You're going for like a 2%, okay, with each tapping. Now watch this right here. Okay, now where do you apply this? You kind of apply it where light meets dark. At least to begin with, okay? I'll apply some of this down here, and it's not light at all, okay? But watch right in here. This is a perfect opportunity to start off with it because it's really light in there. So see, like if I put light over, the top of light, you can't see anything. Nothing's happening at all. That's how you kind of get used to the tapping. You get into the rhythm of it, okay? So but watch right here where light meets dark, right in those background bushes, okay? See that right in here? See how that's a crisp impression of that bush in black, right? But watch how I bring that kind of cloudy, misty area into the foreground. I'll just take some of this. Let's see, maybe make this ball a little bit smaller. You just do that by, just crunching it up. Okay, now see, I can barely see anything right there. Let's add a little bit more. Light tapping. See how it's kind of getting a little bit lighter and lighter? Let's bring that mist right around this cabin a little bit. See how it's just building up slightly? With each tapping, it's like a 2% addition of white, okay? So you can think 5 taps is like 10%. That's still fairly light, right? So see how this, you have like complete control over it. Now I keep going back up here, and I come down, go back up, and come down like that. But now look how that mist is right in there. And how easy is that to do? People think it's hard. I don't know where this comes. If it's like, okay, I don't see anything. And okay, so I have to do it 10 times. Okay, that's, you make it look easy. Just because I can't get it in like one step, it's like hard, but it's not. It's easy because you have complete control over it. Unlike, like brush calligraphy where you do it once and that's hard because, if you don't get it in that first pass, then, there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, now let's take a look back in here. See these trees? They're already light in the background, right? Because I stamped it lighter, but watch this now. At the base of them, or at the top, wherever you want. See, I'm kind of altering them a little bit and making the base look a little bit lighter. So that's kind of like this low-line fog in there. See that right there? Oh, it's varied. That impression, it was like mono value. But now it's like a transitioning value going from light to darker up there. Let's do the same thing right down here, okay? I go like this. Blot it off a few times if you need to, every time you re-ink. And watch this. See this? It's like I can't see anything. I went 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing, okay? That's 20 taps right there. Just in a few seconds, but see how it's starting to turn? That's kind of what you want. You want that control and mastery of it. You know, I mean, that to take care of that one section right in there. I don't know. I mean, it's like 30 seconds or something like that. If that, you know, it's like a few seconds. But look at that mist down at the base right there. Let's bring that over here. Let's bring that same sensibility right in here. Now, I like to oscillate things. I don't want to fog everything out, okay? So let's take a look at right here in this cabin. Let's put a little bit of... Here, I'll keep this up so you can see. But I usually like to turn it like this because I could see what I'm applying right here. When I'm going like this, I can't see it, okay? So I'll do this just for your own benefit. So you can see this upright here, okay? But see that? How it's turning that right there a little bit, or a lot, okay? So I'm adding that fog in, that mist. But look how rich that is now in terms of atmosphere. Okay, it was this dark before, but now look at that. It's like light that you're adding to it. It's like reflected light. Okay? All right, let's add some of it. Here's some light in the background. See, this tree is farther back, those cypress ones, than this foreground tree, but let's hit that with a little bit of tone. Now, doesn't it look like they're kind of bathed in light a little bit, or a lot? Doesn't that push them farther off into the distance, okay? All right, let's bring that same type of fogging in front of these trees right here in our foreground, so we're really incorporating that type of misty cloud with the foreground elements, okay? We'll start off right in here, and watch this right here, okay? See, it's just adding a little bit, right? Adding a little bit more. I have a really light touch on here. Don't go like this. 1, 2, 3. I can't see anything smash, you know, and blob, right? Just stay with it. Now, if I mean it's completely dry and you're not getting anything, but give it, you know, 15, 20 taps lightly and see what you're getting. Everything doesn't have to be kind of handled the same either. You know, you can put a lighter touch right here, then, you know, a heavier touch up there because it's lighter to begin with, you know, so you can kind of put on more in the background if you want. And you can just kind of barely do it right here, but see that atmospheric mist in there? Let's put a little bit right in here too. Let's like say the kind of the lighting is kind of lighting that side of the tree. So you just put light on the side of the tree, like so. See that right there, how it looks like it's capturing some of that lighting from up here? Same thing right here. All this imagery is really crisp right here. And I think it looks good as is, but let's bring some of this into it, okay? See? Nothing, right? Well, I can see a little bit, but let's add it down here. I like to concentrate a little bit more fog on the interior of something than on the outside edge of something, because I usually have my light kind of centralized a little bit, so I don't put too much fog out here, because this fog, in order to see it, it represents is moisture in the air, and it's being illuminated from the light source, okay? So I'd like to keep my edges a little bit darker, just in general. That's why I like to do like the sides of the trees, kind of facing the interior a little bit lighter too. All right, let's see here. Kind of pushing those cypress tree line a little bit farther back by putting some extra white ink over the top. All right, now I'm using the Hero Hues one. This is just a regular pigment ink. If you try to stamp something in that ink on here, it's just not going to dry. But when you're doing like a super light layer like this, that's fine, okay? I could use the brilliance, though. The brilliance will definitely dry on here very quickly, but so will regular pigmentings when you're just applying just a really light um, application of them. I mean, it's like mist, right? It's like powdery, you know, light of an application. Just a very, very thin application of ink. Okay, and one of the things I mentioned in my videos is that when pigmenting dries, it just seems like across the board, no matter what media I'm working with, you know, alcohol inks or whatever, dye-based inks, it just seems like the white pigment ink dries. When it dries, it's more transparent than what it looked like when it was freshly applied. So I am noticing that as I do this, you know, the areas where I applied it first are drying and it's getting darker. You're able to see through it more. So what I do is I just kind of keep building it up until I get the lightness that I want. Okay. It's not an entirely bad thing, you know, to have it darken. If it lightened, then you know you can't really darken it up again. But if it darkens, you can add more pigment ink over the top of it to get what you want. So what that means is it means again kind of artistic control. I'm going to put some of this up in my trees too, just to kind of bring a little bit of this mist into these trees. And I don't do it over all of them. I just kind of do it here and there. I'm kind of going a little bit more extreme as I do this. It's like, oh, I love that mist. Doesn't it kind of make it feel, I don't know, more atmospheric and kind of more maybe indicative of kind of that atmosphere you might see in this type of situation? I've only seen it in photographs, you know. I haven't been out into, you know, this type of terrain before. I'd sure like to one of these days, though. One of my favorite photographers is Clyde Butcher, who's known for his work on kind of the Everglades, and he does these swamp walks over at his studio, where he takes a bunch of people out in the swamp, and they just kind of, you know, you're getting the water, and you're walking around out there. Okay, so that is that. I want to add a little bit of something to this. Okay, let's take my white paint pen, and I want to make it a little bit lighter in the windows, okay? Just to make it kind of pop a little bit more. They're already light because I stamped them into a light area, but let's make it a little bit even more light. Okay, I've just kind of decided against putting the bird in this one. I think I just want to leave it out. Okay, you have to really shake up your paint pen. Kind of do it point down and then change it and go point up. You know, just so you really get that acrylic paint in there mixed in. The more you shake it up and mix it in, the more opaque it gets. Oh, you know, so that being said, if you want like a really light, translucent dot, you know, that's more subtle, then don't shake it up as much. Okay, but you have to shake it up some, though, otherwise it's just like water coming out of there. These are water-based pens. Okay, let's see here. I just feel that when you add kind of this lighting, interior lighting, into structures, there's just something welcoming about it. It also makes it, you know, kind of a stronger focal point like that when you do something like that. Let me add a little. Let me see if I can add a little bit of it down here in the water. I put the reflections down there including the window kind of framing in the water too, like that. All right. Let me take a little scratch knife too. I'm going to put a few little scratches into these window reflections down here. It just makes it a little bit more subtle. Isn't that right there? Yeah. All right. Taking a look here and seeing if I need to do anything else. I think that looks sufficiently dense and atmospheric and, I don't know, alive. It's like water, you know, is life, you know, and it's in the air, you know, the surface down there too, and of course up in the sky in the form of clouds. I don't know. This might not represent sky up here. Maybe it just represents the background, and it's like super foggy. And as you go in the background, you know, imagery kind of gets lost. It gets broken up in terms of the light hitting those objects and coming through all this atmospheric mist, and you know, light gets broken up into the moisture as light's hitting it. Maybe that's how that kind of works. But anyways, fun stuff. Fun with nature set number 21. I really enjoyed using that. And enjoy doing the photo stamping process. It's really fun kind of working within certain parameters sometime, rather than just working on a white piece of paper or something like that. Something like this too, I think, would look fantastic when stamped on, you know, something like a dark cardstock, like a lapis lazuli or something like that. I've stamped this composition on a dark paper. We can imagine that lighting in there would really stand out. Something like that. So I want to play around with things like that coming up. Alright, so anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. And thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.